Heinrich Himmler was the Reich Führer of the SS, a prominent member of the Nazi Party of Germany, and one of the most powerful men in Nazi Germany, known primarily for being one of the main architects of the Holocaust. Today, we will see the greatest betrayal that occurred within the high command of the Third Reich. As a member of a reserve battalion during the First World War, Himmler did not participate in active service or combat. After joining the Nazi Party in 1923 and the SS in 1925, he was appointed Reich Führer SS by Adolf Hitler in 1929. During the following 16 years, Himmler transformed the SS from a battalion of 290 men into a paramilitary group of 1 million members. He was known for his organizational skills and for selecting highly competent subordinates, such as Reinhard Heydrich in 1931. From 1943 onward, he performed duties both as head of the criminal police and as Minister of the Interior, overseeing all internal and external police and security forces, including the Gestapo. He also controlled the Waffen-SS, the military branch of the SS. Himmler's interest in occultism and folkish themes influenced the development of Nazi Germany's racial policy. He also incorporated esoteric symbolism and rituals into the SS. He was the main supervisor of the genocidal programs of Nazi Germany, forming the Einsatzgruppen and administering the extermination camps. In this capacity, Himmler oversaw the murder of approximately 6 million Jews, between 200,000 and 500,000 gypsies, and other victims. One day, before the beginning of Operation Barbarossa, Himmler commissioned the drafting of the General Plan Ost, which was approved by Hitler in May 1942. The total number of civilians killed by the Nazi regime is estimated at between 11 and 14 million people, most of whom were Polish and Soviet citizens. At the end of the Second World War, Hitler briefly appointed Himmler as military commander and then as commander of the replacement army and general plenipotentiary for the administration of the entire Third Reich. Specifically, he was given command of Army Group Upper Rhine and Army Group Vistula. As second in command of the SS and later as Reich Führer SS, Hitler maintained regular contact with Hitler to organize the men of the SS as bodyguards. Hitler did not participate in the political decision-making of the Nazi Party in the years prior to the seizure of power. From the late 1930s onward, the SS were independent of the control of other state agencies or government departments, and he answered only to Hitler. Hitler's leadership style consisted of giving contradictory orders to his subordinates and placing them in positions where their duties and responsibilities overlapped with those of others. In this way, Hitler fostered distrust, competition, and internal struggle among his subordinates to consolidate and maximize his own power. His cabinet did not meet after 1938, and he discouraged his ministers from meeting independently. Hitler generally did not issue written orders, but transmitted them verbally in meetings or telephone conversations. He also had Bormann transmit orders. Bormann used his position as Hitler's secretary to control the flow of information and access to Hitler. Hitler promoted and practiced the principle that required absolute obedience from all subordinates to their superiors. Therefore, Hitler saw the structure of government as a pyramid, with himself as the infallible leader at the top. Consequently, Himmler placed himself in a position of subordination to Hitler and was unconditionally obedient to him. However, like other high-ranking Nazi officials, he aspired one day to succeed Hitler as leader of the Reich. Hitler considered Speer an especially dangerous rival, both in the administration of the Reich and as a possible successor to Hitler. Speer refused to accept Himmler's offer of a high-ranking position, as he believed that doing so would place him in Himmler's debt and force him to allow Himmler an opinion in armaments production. Hitler regarded Hitler's mystical and pseudo-religious interests as nonsense. Hitler was not part of Hitler's inner circle. The two men were not very close and rarely saw each other socially. Himmler socialized almost exclusively with other members of the SS. His unconditional loyalty and his efforts to please Hitler earned him the nickname the Faithful Heinrich. In his role as Reich Commissioner for the Consolidation of Nationality, Himmler was deeply involved in the program of Germanization of the East, especially in Poland, as detailed in the General Plan Ost. The objective was to enslave, expel, or exterminate the local population and transform the territory into Lebensraum for ethnic Germans. Himmler continued with his colonization plans in the East, even when many Germans were reluctant to move there, and despite the negative effects on the war effort. Himmler's racial classifications began with the Volksliste, which classified people considered to be of German blood. The list included Germans who had collaborated with Germany before the war, as well as those who considered themselves German but maintained a neutral stance, those who were partially Polish but could be Germanized, and Germans who held Polish nationality. Himmler ordered that those who refused to be classified as ethnic Germans be deported to concentration camps, have their children taken away, or be forced into labor. His belief that it was inherent to German blood to resist led him to conclude that the Baltic and Slavic peoples who resisted Germanization were the most compatible with the superior race. He declared that he would not allow a single drop of German blood to be lost or mixed with a foreign race. The plan also included the kidnapping of children from Eastern Europe. Himmler said, "Obviously, in such a mixture of peoples, there will always be some racial types that can be used. Therefore, I believe it is our duty to take the children away, remove them from their environment, if necessary by stealing them. Either we will conquer any blood we can use for ourselves and give it a place among our people, or we will destroy that blood." The children considered racially valuable were to be kept away from any contact with Poles and raised as Germans, with German names. Himmler declared above all, "We have faith in our own blood, which throughout German history has flowed into a foreign nationality. We are convinced that our philosophy and ideals will be reflected in the spirit of these children who racially belong to us. The children would be adopted by German families. Those who were initially gathered and later rejected were taken to a ghetto in Watch, where many eventually died." In January 1943, Himmler recorded that 629,000 ethnic Germans had been relocated. However, many of them were not moved to the expected farms, but to camps or temporary shelters in cities. 500,000 residents of the annexed Polish territories, as well as from Slovenia, Alsace, Lorraine, or Luxembourg, were deported to the general government or sent to Germany for forced labor. Himmler instructed that the German nation should regard foreign workers brought to Germany as a threat to the purity of German blood. According to German racial laws, sexual relations between Germans and foreigners were prohibited and considered racial contamination. At the beginning of June 1944, during Operation Overlord, Allied forces landed in northern France. In response, the Germans created Army Group Upper Rhine to confront the advance of the US 7th Army and the French 1st Army in the Alsace region along the western bank of the Rhine River. At the end of 1944, Adolf Hitler appointed Heinrich Himmler Commander-in-Chief of Army Group Upper Rhine. In September 1944, Hitler ordered Himmler to create special army units known as the Volkssturm, recruiting men between 16 and 60 years old. This decision provoked protests from the Minister of Armaments, Albert Speer, who pointed out that skilled workers were being removed from armaments production. Hitler believed he could recruit up to 6 million men, and that these new units would wage a people's war against the invader. However, due to the lack of training, adequate weapons and equipment, the members of the Volkssturm were not prepared for combat, resulting in the death of approximately 175,000 of them in the last months of the war. In January 1945, Hitler launched Operation Nordwind, with the aim of breaking the lines of the US 7th Army and the French First Army to support German forces attacking in the Ardennes offensive, the last major German offensive. Despite some initial victories, the German offensive was blocked by the Americans. On January 25th, the German operation was officially cancelled. That same day, Hitler appointed Heinrich Himmler commander of the newly formed army group Vistula, tasked with defending the region of Pomerania against the advance of the Red Army. However, this appointment was criticized by the German general James Guderian, who considered it a mistake. Operation Solstice, a German attack in Pomerania against Soviet forces, was a failure. In response, Hitler personally blamed Hitler and accused him of not following orders. The situation deteriorated to the point that Hitler replaced Hitler with General Gotthard Heinrich. On March 20th, Hitler, who had been receiving medical attention since February, fled to a sanatorium in Jugendlichen. This series of events marked the deterioration of the relationship between Hitler, and Hitler's confidence in his advisors began to fade. In early 1945, the German war effort was on the verge of collapse, and Hitler's relationship with Hitler had deteriorated. Hitler considered negotiating an independent peace agreement. His masseur, Felix Kersten, who had moved to Sweden, acted as an intermediary in negotiations with Count Volker Bernadotte, head of the Swedish Red Cross. Letters were exchanged between the two men, and Walter Schellenberg organized direct meetings. In March 1945, Himmler issued a directive ordering that Jews be marched from the southeastern fortifications on the Austro-Hungarian border to Mauthausen. He wanted hostages for possible peace negotiations. Thousands died during the marches. Hitler met for the last time on April 20th, 1945, Hitler's birthday, in Berlin, and Hitler swore unwavering loyalty to Hitler during a military meeting. That day, Hitler declared that he would not leave Berlin despite the Soviet advance, along with Göring. Himmler quickly left the city after the meeting. On April 21st, Himmler met with Norbert Mazur, a Swedish representative of the World Jewish Congress, to discuss the release of Jewish prisoners from concentration camps. As a result of these negotiations, about 20,000 people were released in the operation of the White Buses. Himmler falsely claimed during the meeting that the crematoria in the camps had been built to handle the bodies of prisoners who had died in a typhus epidemic. He also falsely claimed very high survival rates in the camps of Auschwitz and Bergen-Belsen, even as those sites were being liberated and the truth was coming to light. On April 23rd, Hitler met directly with Bernadotte at the Swedish consulate in Lübeck, presenting himself as the provisional leader of Germany. He claimed that Hitler would be dead in a few days, hoping that the British and Americans would fight alongside what remained of the Wehrmacht against the Soviets. Himmler asked Bernadotte to inform General Dwight Eisenhower that Germany wished to surrender to the Western Allies, not to the Soviet Union. Bernadotte asked Himmler to put his proposal in writing, and Himmler agreed. Meanwhile, Göring had sent a telegram a few hours earlier asking Hitler for permission to assume leadership of the Reich as his designated deputy, an act that Hitler, influenced by Martin Bormann, interpreted as a demand for him to resign or face a coup d'etat. On April 27th, Himmler's SS representative at Hitler's headquarters in Berlin, Hermann Fegelein, was captured wearing civilian clothes and preparing to desert. He was arrested and taken back to the Führer bunker. On the night of April 28th, the BBC broadcast a Reuters report on Himmler's attempts to negotiate with the Western Allies. Hitler had previously believed that Himmler was loyal only to Joseph Goebbels, who called him the faithful Heinrich. Hitler was enraged by the betrayal and told those still with him in the bunker complex that Hitler's secret negotiations were the worst betrayal he had ever experienced. Hitler ordered the arrest of Hitler, and Fegelein was subjected to a court-martial and shot. By then, the Soviets had advanced to Potsdamer Platz, only 300 meters from the Reich Chancellery, and were preparing to take it. This report, combined with Hitler's betrayal, led Hitler to draft his final testament. In the testament, completed on April 29th, one day before his suicide, Hitler declared both Hitler and Göring traitors, stripped Hitler of all his party and state offices, and expelled him from the Nazi Party. Hitler appointed Grand Admiral Karl Dönitz as his successor. Himmler met with Dönitz in Flensburg and offered himself as second in command. He claimed entitlement to a position in Dönitz's provisional government as Reich Führer SS, believing that the SS would be well positioned to restore and maintain order after the war. Dönitz repeatedly rejected Himmler's attempts and began peace negotiations with the Allies. He wrote a letter on May 6th, 2 days before Germany's surrender, formally dismissing Himmler from all his posts. Rejected by his former comrades and hunted by the Allies, Himmler attempted to hide. He had made no extensive preparations, but carried with him a forged paybook under the name of Sergeant Heinrich Himmler. With a small group of companions, he headed south on May 11th toward Friedrichskoog, with no final destination in mind. On May 21st, Himmler and 2 aides were detained at a checkpoint at Bremer Börde, established by former Soviet prisoners of war. Over the next 2 days, he was transferred to several camps and taken to British civilian interrogation camp 31 near Lüneburg. On May 23rd, officers noticed that Himmler's identity documents bore a stamp that British military intelligence had already seen on fleeing SS members. The duty officer, Captain Thomas Sylvester, began a routine interrogation. Himmler admitted who he was, and Sylvester ordered a search of the prisoner. Himmler was taken to the headquarters of the British Second Army in Lüneburg, where a doctor examined him. The doctor attempted to inspect Himmler's mouth, but the prisoner was reluctant to open it and sharply turned his head. Himmler then bit into a potassium cyanide capsule hidden in his mouth and collapsed to the floor. He died in less than 15 minutes, despite efforts to expel the poison from his system. Shortly afterward, Himmler's body was buried in an unmarked grave near Lüneburg. The exact location of the grave remains unknown. If you feel this video brought you value in any way, please subscribe to the channel. FASVIM Series. See you soon.